Done.
So are you ready for the first question?
Okay.
What
Nervous
is
and
the-
excited.
Okay, awesome. That's always a great start.
Then there was a question asked that if the customer gets irritated or angry, what would you do? Can you guess what could be the answer? Wild guesses.
This is a good answer or bad answer?
Bad answer. Funny
Bad
answer.
answer.
You are asking me inappropriate.
No.
Yeah.
I'll teach them a lesson.
Anything
Oh,
else?
I have to get more inappropriate than this.
So I'll tell you.
I would have never in a million guesses guessed that.
And you used to announce the shortlisted candidate's name.
Yeah.
And I think that candidate was waiting. I don't know why.
What is the best answer you've heard to? Do you have any questions for me?
There was also a scenario when a candidate asked me, when can I start taking leaves?
Those are all real questions. Did that lead to a hire or no? Like someone joining in the first day, that's how many
I
leaves
would
do we
have
get?
gotten killed.
What is the biggest pay hike you have seen?
Well, it was in multiples of 100.
Percent.
Yeah, percent. And he cracked the interview for a level higher than
Okay.
what we had originally proposed. And we ended up paying a massive hike. And still he was not near the min of the salary band.
But did the candidate here ask for that hike?
No, he did not.
What is the worst salary negotiation that you can recall?
There was a recent conversation where a candidate asked me for a 70%, 80% hike. The problem was there was no reason. Towards the end, when we declined it, that we cannot give this much
Yeah.
of hike, it became like a really depressing drama. The candidate became emotional. As an organization, we could have done a better job.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Weekday Show. I'm your host Amit Singh, founder and CEO of Weekday. Welcome to another episode of Weekday Show where we discuss the most common hiring FAQs and talk to recruiting leaders about what should one do during interviews. Our guest for today is Rinki Jain, who's the head of HR and talent acquisition at Jupiter, a fintech startup that has raised more than $160 million. She has more than 15 years of experience in the field. She has earlier worked with Hotstar as well as Amazon, Farmeasy as well. Welcome, Rinki. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. If you want, I can give you a run through of my journey.
Yeah.
So I started off with Accenture. That's where
Okay.
my talent acquisition journey started, and then I moved to Amazon. I was part of very initial team in Amazon India. Then I moved to British Telecom. British Telecom was trying to set up their technology services operation center in India. Post that, I moved to startups.
Okay.
So that's where my first assignment was with Farmeasy. Again, was part of very early on team. Then I joined Hotstar and then Jupiter.
Okay. And how many interviews would you have taken so far in your career?
Very difficult to guess, maybe in lakhs.
All right, folks. So, with that context in mind, let's have a quick rapid fire. So, we'll have two sections. First is rapid fire, where we'll ask directed questions, which are mostly interview scenarios or things that candidates should keep in mind while interviewing with companies.
Sure.
And the secondly, we'll talk about more about your journey.
Okay,
All right.
done.
So, are you ready for the first question?
Okay.
All right.
Nervous and excited.
Okay, awesome. That's always a great start. What is the biggest pay hike you have seen a candidate get, and what led to that pay hike?
Well, it was in multiples of 100.
Percent.
Yeah, percent. So there was a candidate whom we were trying to chase for good 6 to 8 months. We wanted to bring him on the table to interview. It took us time to convert him, but what followed after that was remarkable. He went through the conversations and he cracked the interview for a level higher than
Okay.
what we had originally proposed. And of course, after that, we had to bring him at least near to the min of the salary band. And we ended up paying a massive hike. And still, he was not near the min of the salary band.
Okay.
He performed very well, so it eventually paid off.
Okay, but do you recommend making these exceptions within company?
Well, if your interview process is very streamlined and you have good salary bands, you have to take care of the right fits. So if somebody is doing exceptionally well in interviews and they are cracking, they are cracking the bar with flying colors, you should do it, in my opinion.
But did the candidate here ask for that
No,
hike?
he did not.
Okay.
The company went ahead and did that for the candidate because he actually cracked the bar and he did the interviews very well.
Okay. All right. Okay. The next one. What is the worst salary negotiation that you can recall, and what did the person do wrong?
Well, there was a recent conversation where a candidate asked me for a 70%, 80% hike.
Yeah.
The problem was there was no reasoning. And when pushed, the candidate mentioned that he has not received hikes in his earlier organization. Well, I understand the market has not been very kind, but if a little bit of research could have happened, the person could have negotiated based on, why does he need that kind of hike, I think I could have empathized better. So, and towards the end, while we were very transparent since the start what the budget of the role is, towards the end when we declined it that we cannot give this much
Yeah.
of hike, it became like a really depressing drama. So, let's just, I would say it could have been avoided.
What happened? What was the drama?
He, the candidate became emotional, etc.
Oh, okay.
That could have been avoided if he could have just explained, in terms of why is the need. Maybe as an organization, we could have done a better job.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The next one. What is the best answer you've heard to the typical end of interview question, which is, do you have any questions for me?
Well, at the start of Jupiter, when we were trying to hire the first league of leaders, there was an interesting conversations towards the end of which a candidate asked me that how fluid is the org structure in the organization. So if I'm doing my job well and if I have time, can I contribute to other areas? I think that was a brilliant question because there was an intent, there was curiosity to know more, right? There was hunger. I think that's what a startup needs. On the contrary, there was also a scenario when a candidate asked me, when can I start taking leaves? Now,
Those are all real questions.
yeah. See, he could have asked me, what's your leave policy? Or could have explained, what I'm trying to say is articulation matters, or could have
Correct.
explained that in the coming few months, I have certain vacation planned. So you tell me how can I
Yeah.
take that?
Correct.
Right? Then maybe, as an HR or as a recruiter, we could have explained or figured out a workaround.
For the latter one, did that lead to a hire or no? Like someone joining in the first day, that's how many
I
leaves
would
do
have
we
gotten
get?
killed.
All right, moving on.
But
yeah.
just to stop you, but there are cases where candidates have told us that they have already pre-planned vacations, and we have tried giving them workarounds.
Yeah.
So I would just request that they should be just honest.
Yeah. And you run the risk of like coming across as someone who's just there to
Correct.
like not really the hunger is not there. You just want to take.
And in terms of recruiters being able to set expectations with the hiring managers so that they are mentally prepared.
Correct. Yeah. All right. The next one. What is the best typical start of interview question, which is tell me about yourself? You've heard, and what is the worst one?
I usually don't ask that question because then it becomes like a verbose conversation. Person just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I did this and I did that. So I usually ask them about the top 2 outcomes that they have achieved in each of the stints.
This is the first interview question.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I glanced through the resume, I've already gone through their stints. My interview is usually placed in between the interview process or towards the end.
Yeah.
So I'm sure my team would have done the job of asking why did this person, leave the job. So the basic checks would have been done.
Yeah.
So I usually concentrate on the outcomes that they would have achieved, and then I try and deep dive in them. If the person is able to answer and articulate well, I think the job is done.
And this you ask at each of their stints or only one of the major
I
ones?
usually tell them that in each of the stints, tell me about 1 or 2 outcomes that you are proud of or that you think created a huge impact. And then they tell me something or the other. Then I ask them how much percentage shift was that? How did you achieve it? What were the top 2 solutions that you brought up? Right? If you deep dive into this aspect, I think it's okay.
Okay. And generally, like just not following the structure here, but generally in your interviews, does it follow a set pattern, or is it led by the answer to this first question and then the conversation flows from there?
I think it's led by the first, whatever answer the person gives, then I try and deep dive
Okay.
into the latter aspects. But of course, I have my set of 3-4 things that I want to test. That usually is the case.
And what's your favorite interview question to ask?
Well, there used to be a favorite question
Yeah.
earlier. I have stopped asking that. I used to ask if you had a superpower, what would that be and why? In fact, when I joined Jupiter and I was doing the values workshop for the first time, I had actually rolled out this question to the internal employees as well. But nowadays I don't ask that, but I've got very interesting answers to it.
What were the good, interesting answers?
So
there?
there was one answer that a candidate told me that he would pause time. There were 2 candidates actually who told me that they would pause time.
Yeah.
One candidate told me that they would pause time because so that they can react very calmly, they can assess the situation, right, and correct their mistakes. The other person also told me that they would pause time to make people forget about their mistakes.
Okay, but why will people forget? Okay.
Yeah. So make people forget about their mistakes in terms of if he has done something wrong.
Okay.
So yeah,
He'll
so
correct
then he'll correct it. So just 2 different ways of answering it. One
Yeah.
was a great answer in my opinion. The other one was like, I'll just go and just maybe tear off my assignment or whatever, and then I'll just redo it. So very, very different ways, but both of them gave me the same answer.
And why did you stop asking this question?
I think I think I just evolved. I started asking very different kinds of questions.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, this was my favorite question.
Okay. All right.
There's no particular reason to it. Maybe now from tomorrow I'll start asking this question.
Yeah, just mix it up.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So the last one in rapid fire. What is the most inappropriate thing a candidate has ever said or done during an interview?
Well, I have plenty of examples.
Okay, let's start. Let's one by one.
But I'll like to quote one,
Yeah.
which I have never forgotten. It, in fact, happened more than a decade ago. You have volume hiring, right? So I started off my career with volume hiring, where we had these large events. Candidates used to walk in,
Yeah.
and to trim down top of the funnel, we used to have written tests. So written tests were a combination of logical questions, mathematical questions, plus some case studies, case scenarios.
Yeah.
So there was a case scenario where I don't remember the case scenario, but there was something written, and then there was a question asked that if the customer gets irritated or angry, what would you do? Can you guess what could be the answer? Wild guess.
This is a good answer or bad answer?
Bad answer. Funny
Bad
answer.
answer.
You are asking me inappropriate.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would they have done inappropriate to if the customer gets? I'll teach them a lesson.
Anything
Oh,
else?
I have to get more inappropriate than this.
So I'll tell you.
Yeah.
The person actually drew a dinosaur, and then there was a speech bubble which said, "I will eat the customer."
I would have never in a million guesses guessed that.
I still remember it. I in fact took a picture, and then recently I was just searching for that picture. I couldn't find it, but I remember that you used to go out then and you used to announce the shortlisted candidate's name.
Yeah.
And I think that candidate was waiting. I don't know why. So that piece I can never forget. It was the most hilarious thing. There are a lot of other scenarios which have happened, but I think let's just keep it to this answer.
Okay, all right. But does that usually happen? Like, is it a common occurrence?
In volume hiring, it has never happened. Actually, that was one scenario. I'll be honest.
Okay.
But there are a lot of funny incidents that you come across. So yeah, once or twice, so 1-2 incidents every recruiter will have for sure.
Yeah.
But this was something out of the blue, so I quoted.
All right. Okay, that brings us to the end of this segment.
Okay.
We'll now move on to the deep dive about your journey. So, let's start from the point where, at what point did you decide that you wanted to sort of come into HR field and specifically talent acquisition?
Well, I would say that it was accidental. So I am a postgraduate in psychology,
Yeah.
and I wanted to do clinical psychology, but this was more than a decade ago. And at that point of time, of course, nobody knew what are the use cases of clinical psychology, etc.
Yeah.
So I thought, let's at least get out of my hometown. I had done my schooling. I was born and brought up in Gwalior. It's in Madhya Pradesh, if people do not know. And then I started searching for a job. I had not put it in my LinkedIn, but my first job was with GE Capital.
Okay. Yeah.
So I interviewed, etc., and I was very fascinated with the way these recruiters came to the campus and they conducted interviews, and I was very, very just naturally fascinated with the profession.
Yeah.
So I decided that I will give it a shot. If not clinical psychology, then I will at least try recruiting.
Okay.
And I was, I ate head of the HRs there, and few of them are still in touch with me. They are still my mentors.
Okay.
So it's been a very fascinating journey because the space has evolved so much, right? So every day it's something new, something inspiring for me. So I have only grown from where I was to where I am today.
And from when you started your career to now, like, what are the 2-3 major changes that you see has happened in the HR field?
Well, HR field is very vast,
Yeah.
but I'll cover up TA.
Yeah,
So let's cover up TA. In talent acquisition, I would say broadly 2 things I'll categorize it in.
Yeah.
First is the expectations that the hiring manager and the organization has from recruiters. Right? From where I started off, I remember there was a keyword search, Boolean search, right? Recruiters had to type it in and search the relevant resumes.
Yeah.
It was all about sourcing, building pipelines, maybe conducting the interview process, and they had little idea of what this person will do.
Okay.
But I think eventually when the startup evolution started in India, the ecosystem, when it started getting built, I feel that the expectations have changed a lot. Right, so the hiring managers or the organization expects recruiters to have broader vision, to understand how this role will fit into the large scheme of things. So the recruiters are expected to have that business understanding, right? Are expected that they not only do sourcing and coordination and all of that, but they also manage the entire gamut of things, right from the time when the candidate has to discover a job. So how do you represent yourself on different forums? Right?
Yeah.
Preparing that overall value proposition, right? Will this role, whatever job description has been provided, is that the right job description? What are the right areas to focus on, etc., etc., right? So the situation and the expectations from recruiters have changed a lot, first thing. Second thing is the overall evolution of technology and tools. The kind of tracking systems that we had earlier versus now. It's become a 360-degree change, right? Dashboarding.
Yeah.
Plus, we had only Naukri, Monster, Times during those times. But now look at it, right? Weekday,
Yeah.
right, is one example. LinkedIn, which has become like a social media mammoth, right? So many things have changed, right? And now AI,
Yeah.
right? So that's going to move a lot of repetitive tasks from recruiters' lives so that they can concentrate on bigger things. So definitely the industry has evolved a lot. There is just no second thought about it.
And to your, so you mentioned AI. So specifically in the last 2 years, like, how have you seen sort of recruiting and TA changed because of AI? And for better or for worse, what has...
Well, see, I'll be honest. AI in some way or form existed. Right, so but just that now I think it has got a lot of attention, like the interview assessment techniques, right? The
Yeah.
interview assessment platforms
Yeah.
was somewhat AI driven. Like now you have Zoom AI, right? Where when you are talking, you can actually make rough notes, right? Plus, apart from that, I have also seen larger setups because my friends work in those setups. They have actually invested a lot on doing first level of screening also through AI, like there's like a live recruiter talking to you,
Yeah.
and you can't differentiate between like a normal recruiter or a human recruiter versus an AI recruiter. So all those changes have come in.
What are your thoughts on that as a sort of solution, as a software to exist?
Well, I think there will still be a human intervention required for sure. You can, and I don't know how well they will train the model in future, but it's just a start. So very difficult to comment, but definitely if used well, it can aid recruiters become more productive for sure, right? At least your key sourcing and all these tasks which they do, right, which are repetitive in nature, those will go away. um, like I told you, right, you have these keyword search, boolean search. Right now with AI evolution, you can easily will be able to create that initial pipeline, finish off your initial screening, then you have to concentrate on much more strategic things.
And so carry forwarding this. So one is within the recruiting function, but let's say within a company as well. Do you foresee lesser number of jobs because of AI, or is it too early to comment now?
I think it'll be too early to comment. I know that things will evolve over a period of time, but I would say that AI would only help people scale in their jobs. I don't see a reduction in jobs, but definitely less manual work.
Yeah.
Lot less manual work. You will have much more meatier roles, in my opinion, if utilized well.
Okay, got it.
And that's how technology should be used.
And that's how it has been happening as well.
So that's why I say AI maybe is a word that has started coming up a lot nowadays. But I think in some way or form, AI existed.
It has gotten much better now.
Yeah, it's just gotten better.
Moving on from the conversation about AI, let's talk a little bit about talent acquisition. So for most candidates, they don't have much idea of what exactly happens behind the scenes. So for example, whenever there's mostly they'll see a job post on LinkedIn or anywhere and they'll apply and then they get a call. But what exactly is happening behind the scenes? How are the teams structured? Who looks at what? Can you just walk us through how typically at, let's say, a startup like Jupiter?
Sure. So see, startups and larger setups will function very differently, right? In larger setups, the volumes are high.
Yeah.
Right. So they will have very, very specified, narrowed tasks, right? They will focus on very, very broken journey. It's called a funnel model usually, or a shared service model.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, like my first organization, Accenture, right? The volume of roles, open roles were plenty, at least 10x of what we see in a normal startup that they have to close.
So let's say if there's 10 in a startup, there would be 100.
100.
Okay.
Right. So now, and most of them would be on priority. They will be like,
everything
is like P0. It has to be closed as of yesterday. So they will have a shared service model in which there will be certain tasks or teams which will be only responsible for doing certain things. Like, how do I explain? It will not be end-to-end journey. So there will be somebody who will be taking care of only sourcing. And within sourcing, they will have a referral team. They will have a vendor management team. They will have a self-sourcing team.
And that is for all the roles. So it's not one person who's responsible for one role.
Yeah, all the roles. But there will be different teams aligned. Then within that, there will be tech, non-tech, or it will be aligned as per different roles. Right? Then it will move to a coordination or a scheduling team.
Yeah.
Who will schedule interviews with the interviewers, etc., etc. And then it is it's the same ATS where everyone can see what is happening, but the process is divided between different cohorts or different functions within recruiting. So that's like a shared service model.
That is generally followed by larger organizations.
In smaller organizations, as soon as a resume comes in, first of all, it depends on the volume of resumes, right? So for very, very intern roles or very junior roles, you will get like a sea of resumes.
Let's put a number to that. Let's say there is an opening that you've done.
Yeah, so if it's a very entry level position between 0 to 2 years of experience, you can definitely expect applicants in thousands.
Okay.
If it's an intern, then maybe multiples of thousands, right?
And there is one person who's responsible for
so
this
one
role.
person. So there are ways to even trim it down at the top of the funnel. There are certain ATS or tools where you can put in screening questions right in the application. So automatic filter happens and you can shortlist only the required resumes. If that's not there, then of course everything flows into their mailbox. Then they have to go through those resumes.
Okay.
If it's flowing, if they have an ATS tool or a recruiting tool,
Yeah.
then they can do their search through keywords or whatever is the methodology,
Yeah.
and they can shortlist the top bunch.
Yeah.
Right? Then they will go back to the candidate, have an initial conversation. Now, this process, depending on the volume of resumes, can take considerable amount of time, right? To clean up, to ensure that they shortlist the right people, they present it to the hiring managers, take that buy-in and a confidence from them to do an initial conversation.
Yeah. So let's take a look at this funnel. So for example, there are thousands of applications. There are certain set of people who are selected, like screened by the recruiter. Now, is it fair to say that most resumes might not be seen by a recruiter?
Well, if the applications are in volume and they have some, they must be having some filtering criteria.
Yeah.
Right, so it will not be possible, humanly not be possible for recruiters to go through and skim through each and every resume. But as the levels move up,
Yeah.
right, it becomes more of outreach.
Correct. Yeah.
Then of course,
Then
it becomes like a handpicking thing, right? So then they go through all the resumes which even come inbound, right? But when it's volume, it becomes very difficult, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, so that's where my next sort of question comes. That let's say there is a candidate who is applying for a junior position and knows that this is a volume based one. So now they're in the fringe of being okay. Like for example, someone who's worked in branding but wants to work in marketing. So sort of wants to make that change or has done some bit, but they most likely, if they had not followed a specific plan, they might not be get shortlisted. What can such people do to increase their chances of their resume being seen by a recruiter?
Well, I would say that reaching out 101 with a good reasoning would help. If you go through the normal channel and if your resume is not not as per the skill set which has been mentioned, obviously you will get, it will not be seen because somewhere there will be screening.
Yeah.
And they will not call up and ask you that why did you apply, right? So I think they will have to reach out 101 either through LinkedIn, or there are so many Chrome extensions right now from where you can fetch email IDs, etc. You reach out and people are reciprocative, right? They will understand. There are a lot of people in newer generation where I have seen that they do different kinds of internships to figure out where is their interest, right? So that's actually, that happens.
And that's not annoying for the person receiving those mails?
Well, if the explanation is given, if details are given, I think, and if I think it should be possible. It should be okay, in my opinion. But if there have been 2-3 different job families that they have been part of, and then now they want to switch to something else, of course, even those 101 reach outs may not work.
So this is basically people who think that they might be fit if they got a chance and they got a chance.
And there are so many cases, right? You see, day to day, there are so many people in my own team who did their engineering, and maybe later on they felt that HR is, or people side is something that they want to do. Right? So maybe their initial years would have been into coding, but later on they moved into people side. So it's okay. It happens. But when you're applying for a job, and you're coming through the funnel, it's very difficult for your resume to get shortlisted because, and depending on the level of the role, unless you route your resume through a different channel or a 101 email, I think your chances to be seen would be much higher.
Okay. So now let's
very
move
logical explanation.
Yeah, of course. And so generally I think more and more people are doing that also, but it just helps that, a lot of people who think that this might be like, I don't want to annoy, I don't want to hurt my chances, मैंने apply तो कर दिया है, but if I write a mail, what if they get annoyed?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Gen Z thinks like that. I think maybe people of our age used to think and
Yeah.
were hesitant, but I don't think so. Gen Zs think like that. And any which ways, my advice would be that you have to, if you are curious and you think that your interest lies somewhere else, there's no harm, right? If you will
Yeah.
not even try it, you will never know whether it's possible or not,
Yeah.
right? So I think people should, at least justify and put in put in a word to the right person. In the sea of resumes, your resume definitely will get lost if it's not matching the skill set.
And let's now talk about people with, let's say, more years of experience, which is lesser of volume sort of driven thing. How exactly does recruiting happen there?
So, well, there is a recent role that we are trying to hire, which is for our Jaipur location. We recently opened up an office there, and we are looking for a site leader there. Right? Of course, we have posted on job boards, etc., and we are getting a lot of inbound applications, and it's a common process of screening, etc., that gets followed. But you do a lot of outreach as well. You have to handpick people who might be a fit. Now, for this role, we definitely require somebody with the right technical capabilities. So, their coding, design, data structures, algorithms, all those skill sets are important. They need to be hands on with people management as well. But they also need to be culture champions. They also need to be enablers of setting up that whole site. Right? So, it's a very different kind of resume and a combination that you need. So I think in mostly such kind of niche roles where you are very you have too many specifications, outreach works best, referrals work best, right? You reach out to the right communities and network and ask them for referrals. I think those things work very well. Actually, in your first question, another way for these folks who come from a very different skill set and they want to try something else, even references would work very well.
Okay, yeah.
So if they go through the route of maybe figuring out the right people in their community and get their resume pushed through them, I think it will work out well. Their resume is definitely to be seen.
And so now on the, let's say, what is it that someone can do to increase their chances of being reached out by a recruiter? Like, for example, if, let's say for larger roles, if the outreach is one of the major channels, what should a person do to just ensure that, hey, I'm generally not looking out, but what should I do in place in general, just hygiene? What should I keep on doing so that I have a steady flow of sort of companies coming to me and like I could increase my chances of getting an outreach?
Well, as I said, right, social media and these job boards, I would not say that you keep your resume active on job boards and all.
Yeah.
Right, you are a passive seeker.
Correct.
Mainly, right?
Yeah.
First of all, is a cleaned up resume or cleaned up structured thing on LinkedIn. Right?
Okay.
At least talk about the major things that you have done. So, few people I have seen, they will not update their LinkedIn. And then if you expect calls, that's never going to happen. Right? So, at least some minimalistic description of what you are doing, so that if somebody is even viewing your resume, they are able to see, the work that you have done. And, that's first point to increase your chances of visibility. Second thing is, I think networking. And now there are a lot of avenues to network, right? You go into recruiting, several events, not recruiting events, that's for recruiters, but several events, etc. So I think your chances to be seen become much higher because you post it on social media, you are regularly seen. What else there?
Does thought leadership help, like in general? So basically right now there will be a lot of people who, one is, yes, they want to build their brand in their specific field. So a lot of people write content, a lot of people post on LinkedIn, etc. Does that help, or is that something that generally does not?
Well, I have seen a surge in that recently, especially in the past 6 months to 1 year. Earlier, that was never the case, right? So, a lot of times we, as a recruiting community, used to headhunt. So, you used to map out and, used to figure out where are these right talent, which communities they are lying at, etc. Nowadays, of course, it helps. It's a newer way. But don't overdo it. right?
Okay.
Then that also becomes like too much. They see you everywhere. Then it shows that you're not actually working, just doing this. So yeah, in balance, everything is fine.
And do recruiters look at Twitter?
Well, I have not seen it. I have not seen it. But maybe for specific roles, like in marketing, maybe they can, right? It would make a difference. But for engineering, no. Right? For engineering, they might look at GitHub. They might look at Stack Overflow, their contributions in CodeShare for other websites, right? So it depends on the role.
All right. And for any role, let's take an example of a mid-level role. What is the the proportion between inbound to sort of doing an outreach that you would see?
Mid to senior, let's take
Yeah.
it. Right? So I would say it would be 60-40, right? 60, I would still say would be outreach. 40 would be relevant resumes coming inbound.
And for, let's say, recruiters who are reaching out, how important is it for them to understand what exactly, for example, if someone is hiring for let's say, a React, like a front-end developer who knows React. So how important is for the recruiter to actually understand what that means?
Well, so definitely knowing the basics is important, right? The frameworks, the programming languages, etc. But it's also important because many recruiters don't come from engineering background, but many
Yeah.
recruiters do come from engineering background.
Yeah.
Right? For them, it's a plus. Right? People who do not come from engineering background, they have to deep dive into the projects in terms of how did this technology help? Why did they choose this technology? Right? At mid to senior level, it also becomes a choice for like senior SDs or architects, right? They actually make a choice. They have, in those roles, you actually decide which technology to use versus what, right? So if
Yeah.
they're able to explain those nuances and how did they implement those technologies and why did they use them, those particular technologies, I think that does the trick. Mostly if people are able to answer, but yes, some basic knowledge is required. Like when we were hiring for Android and all, we used to figure out, what libraries
Yeah.
are being used when I was in Hotstar. And we used to try and ask details around those libraries to the candidates if they are, aware about those libraries and some basic questions around it.
All right. That brings me to the last question I have, which is a two-part question, which is basically what advice would you give to one, job seekers, and second, early stage recruiters, the advice that you have not talked about so far in the.
Okay. So early stage recruiters, because I was also an early stage recruiter at some point of time. Well, I think a lot of times at early stage, people chase titles. Uh, they want to just change the job because they're not getting promoted in their current company, etc. Even if the work environment is good. I have just one advice. See, career is very long. Career is like 25, 28 years. Your life is longer. I think it's extremely important to build your basics and fundamentals, right? So choose the right organization, right team, right mentors, build your fundamentals, improve, figure out your weaknesses, strengths, build on them, improve your weaknesses, etc. And then in the later years, that's going to pay you off. If you have the knowledge, if your fundamentals are strong, fame, success, money will follow.
But also, like, sort of the initial thing that you mentioned, what's your take on like people switching too often at early stage in their career?
Well, I have done that myself, but if I go back and look at it, maybe I could have spent more time. I think, but that wisdom comes to you only when you reach a certain stage, right? And I keep telling this to people that if you're liking the culture, you like the work environment, you are getting ample opportunities to try your hands at, stick, be there, stay put, right? Learn as much as you can. That's my advice.
Okay. All right. And for job seekers?
Well, job seekers. Well, I think when somebody spends 2-3 years in a company, sometimes what all they have done now becomes fuzzy in their head. I would advise that start searching for a job, but before that, just write down in detail what all things you have done. Just think through and write down. Just give yourself some time to prepare. It will help you talk and articulate better. It will help you structure your thought process better. And even if 1-2 interviews come your way, because you know how the market situations are, you will be able to crack it confidently. Just don't randomly apply everywhere. I think give some time. Preparation is the key, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you'll be surprised how many people don't do that.
Yeah, people don't do it. And trust me, writing helps. You actually take 1-2 days off, just write, think and write, because sometimes you just tend to forget,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
At that point of time, that particular project might be very important, but later on it's just lost in the weeds.
Yeah, so like a parallel to that, in like for example, when you're pitching for investment, like for a startup, generally when you're pitching, like they basically note down that okay, these are the 3 things that I want the person who's listening to my pitch to remember. That, and I think generally when if you write it down, then it helps you remember as well. Like these are the things I want the interviewer to remember. Maybe.
Correct. I think writing helps you get that clarity, for sure.
All right, great, Ricky. Thank you so much for coming on the Weekday Show.
Thank you.